The Hollow That Ate the Sun, a Southern Gothic of Brotherhood and the Dead, written and narrated by Douglas A. Gosselin. Chapter 1. Where the Hurt Stays. 1976 to 77. Jimmy saw the gun before he saw the boys. The air that day sat thick enough to choke, steaming up from the bayou like a breath too long held. Jimmy wandered shirtless along the lower bank, a dried frog skull in one hand, a stick in the other, weighing whether it was cursed or cool, probably both. The bayou smelled like dead leaves and old rain. The ground squelched underfoot, sucking at him with every step. Then, stillness. Not the lazy kind that settled in after rain. The wrong kind, the kind that said you weren't alone anymore. He spotted them, strangers, older, faces flat and sharp. One of them raised a pellet gun. Jimmy froze. So did they. No words. Just that crackle of bad electricity between them. Too late to duck, too early to run. Then, pfft! The shot cracked the thick air. Pain bloomed under his ribs like a match struck too close to dry paper. He didn't yell. He ran. Up the slope, bare feet tearing through thorns and dead weeds, lungs burning, heart hammering a furious warning under his ribs. He burst through the gate, half blind with sweat and grit, and found his father in the garage, sleeves rolled up, grease ground deep into his nails. "They shot me," Jimmy said, voice flat. That was all it took. His father looked once at the welt, didn't ask a single question. Just picked up a hammer from the bench, not to swing, but to remind, and marched back down the trail. When they returned, the boys sat slumped on the porch, sneakers heavy with mud, fear fresh in their eyes. Jimmy folded his arms and stared. His father didn't yell. He didn't need to. He stood over them like a verdict already passed. The shooter, Randy, worked for Jimmy's dad. Not anymore. "You shoot my boy again," his father said, voice calm as a guillotine, "and it won't be your shirt that gets torn." No one argued. Not then. Not ever again. Randy's dad didn't argue, and no one did. The bayou didn't need contracts. It had glances. It had silence. And silence out here was binding. The reckoning. Later, Jimmy sat on the porch, legs swinging slow over the cracked step, a chipped cup of Kool-Aid sweating in his hand. His father leaned back in an old metal chair, smoking the last of a cigarette that barely held together. The porch light buzzed overhead, moths battering themselves blind against it. The heat pressed down, thick, still, full of things too tired to run anymore. Jimmy took a sip, too sweet, thick enough to make his teeth ache. He swallowed anyway. "You ever do anything that dumb?" he asked, not looking over. His dad blew smoke into the fat night air, where it hung heavy, a second sky sagging above the porch. "Yeah," he said, "plenty. Nothing more. Nothing needed." The dark pressed closer, the kind of night that wraps itself around you if you sat still long enough. His father pinched the cigarette out between two fingers, a fast, practiced move. Field stripped it without even thinking, tore the paper, scattered the loose tobacco neatly into the dirt at the porch's edge, and tucked the empty filter and paper into his shirt pocket. No spark left burning, no trash left behind. Then he stood, joints creaking like tired porch boards, and disappeared inside without another word, letting the screen door slap shut behind him. Jimmy stayed. The Kool-Aid syruped down his throat, thick and warm. It tasted too sweet, like something trying too hard to fix what couldn't be fixed. He kept drinking anyway. Because sometimes staying wasn't about being tough. It was about not knowing what else to do. Out past the yard, the bayou slid through the dark, slow, brown, and breathing, like it always had, like it always would. Jimmy shifted in his chair, the rough fabric of his bandage pulling against his skin. The welt from the pellet gun throbbed in time with his heartbeat. The scab would heal, the muscle would knit, but that small, hard part inside him, the part that had stood up, bled, and not cried, that part wasn't going anywhere. It had settled deeper tonight, under the skin. Harder now, quieter, out where the trees hunched low over the water. The cicadas had gone still. Only the soft lap of the bayou against the silt carried on, slow and patient. Jimmy finished the Kool-Aid. He set the glass down, and sat there a while longer, letting the night fold itself around him like a second skin. He wasn't thinking about revenge, wasn't thinking about the boys who shot him or even the bruise he'd carry for weeks. He was thinking about the way his dad hadn't lectured, hadn't coddled, had just stood there, solid and certain, and believed Jimmy could stand too. Maybe that was the whole thing. Maybe you didn't get tougher. Maybe you just stopped waiting for someone to catch you. Jimmy leaned back in the chair and listened to the blue bug zapper collect the dead. Because sometimes that was all you could do. And maybe that was why, a year later, under a different sky, with a different kind of trouble waiting, he didn't flinch. Not when the dark pressed down thick as wet wool. Not when the porch lights out past Charing Cross Road blinked out, one by one, like eyes closing for good. It was the summer before, under that same pitiless sun. The slope below the playground wasn't made for bikes, but nobody told Jimmy or Barry Wilson. Barry went first. Of course he did, blasting down on his Huffy like he had a guardian angel and a death wish. He made it clean to the bottom. Jimmy spotted something Barry hadn't, a rocky rise jutting from the hillside like a dare. It looked like a ramp. It looked like fate. They were a team, always had been. Barry, the fireball pitcher who made other kids flinch. Jimmy, the only one who could catch him without ending up bruised or crying. Whole summers they'd spent across from each other. Barry winding up, Jimmy steady behind the plate, glove out, eyes locked, trust running between them like a taut wire. So when Jimmy saw the ramp, saw where Barry had gone, and decided to go bigger, it wasn't bravado. It was instinct. The next pitch, his turn to catch the air. He didn't even pedal. Gravity grabbed him and yanked him down fast, too fast, the bike rattling and shuddering under him like it wanted to tear itself apart. The wind slapped his face. The sun hammered down. The tires hit the rise. For a breathless heartbeat, Jimmy was airborne, caught between childhood and whatever came next. Then the front tire twisted, and gravity finished what it started. He flew over the handlebars headfirst. No helmet, no chance, just skin and bone against gravel and concrete. Crunch, bounce, thud. Jimmy lay still, blood starting to well fast and dark. Barry stood at the bottom of the hill, squinting up into the glare. As the dust settled and blood bloomed into the dirt, Barry shook his head wide-eyed and called out, "Dang, Jimmy!" It was the summer of '77, before bike helmets, before helicopter parents, before everything came stamped with a warning label. Back then, your bones were your brakes, and asphalt was your teacher. And Jimmy had just graduated hard. "You're bleeding," Barry said, pointing at the spreading stain on Jimmy's thigh. Jimmy moved or tried to. His body jerked once in the dirt like a cut marionette. Gritting his teeth, he unzipped his shorts, no tear in the fabric. But inside, he saw it. Muscle, veins, blood, a jagged L-shaped gash, pulsing, raw and wet. Barry's face went completely stone still. He saw it too. The flap of skin peeling back like old wallpaper. The flesh underneath pink, glistening, wrong. "Ah!" Jimmy screamed. Birds exploded from the trees above them, wings flashing against the blistering sky. A woman with a baby on her hip walked to the edge of the slope, saw the blood, the wreckage, and walked away. Barry stared after her, dumbfounded. It was the kind of thing you didn't forget. Not ever. He dropped to his knees beside Jimmy, hands shaking. "Come on, man," he muttered. "We gotta move." Jimmy blinked up at him, slow and dazed. "Okay," he whispered. Barry hauled him up, slinging Jimmy's arm over his shoulders. Jimmy's leg gaped wide and wet, the muscle underneath raw and slick, but the blood didn't run fast. It just glistened thick in the sun. Jimmy didn't scream, didn't even wince much. "It doesn't hurt," he said after a few steps. "Like, at all." Barry didn't answer. He wasn't sure that was a good thing. They stashed the bikes in the brush, under sunflowers and scrap metal and the broken afternoons of summer, and started up the Bayou path. The sun beat down, relentless. The cicadas screamed. Jimmy leaned heavier and heavier against him, but he kept talking. Not scared exactly, just wide open. "Julie kissed me," Jimmy said after a while. "In the janitor's closet." Barry grunted. "What?" "At school. After art. We were cleaning brushes. She said we should find more turpentine, but we didn't." Jimmy chuckled, then flinched. "We just stood there. She kissed me. Like, really kissed me." Barry stared straight ahead, sweat stinging his eyes. "Julie Mathers?" Jimmy nodded. "Yeah. She just smiled and ran when the bell rang. Now when I see her, it's like it never happened." Dust clung to their legs. Sweat ran down their backs. A red-winged blackbird shot out of the grass. Jimmy said almost to himself, "I think she liked it too. I just don't know what to say now." Barry kicked at a clump of dirt. "Maybe want to kiss again?" Jimmy laughed in a quick, real laugh, then clutched his thigh. "Don't make me laugh. My leg's gonna fall off." He didn't know why he was telling Barry this. Maybe because it had happened. Quick and messy and bright. Jammed between the brooms and the mops behind the cafeteria. The air thick with bleach and floor wax. It hadn't been soft. It hadn't been slow. It had just been there. Fast and real and gone. No one else knew. Not until now. Not until Jimmy figured if he was going to bleed out here, stupid and young and half a mile from home, someone should know he'd been kissed. Even if it didn't mean anything. Even if it meant everything. Barry didn't say much. Just grinned, crooked, and kept walking. That was enough. They limped onward, pretending they weren't scared, pretending the river wasn't breathing hot at their backs, waiting to remember them wrong. Jimmy wiped his palms on his jeans, grabbed the Chronicle bundle, heavy and sagging like it always was on Fridays, and tied it tighter. Some things you carried, some things you left behind. They reached Jimmy's backyard, the brand new gate his dad had just finished. No more climbing, no more splinters. Jimmy staggered through, dropped onto the old vinyl couch inside, and called out for his parents, trying to keep his voice steady. "Don't scream," he warned his mother when she rushed in. He unzipped his shorts slowly. She didn't scream. Jimmy didn't know why he told her not to scream. It wasn't like she ever screamed. She yelled, sure, at him, at his brothers, at the sagging house, at the car that wouldn't start. There was always something. Most days it seemed like she was carrying too much noise, too much heat, too much life that never quite got easier. And all of it leaked out sharp and angry. Jimmy wasn't scared she'd panic, and he was scared she'd get louder, that she'd see the blood, see what he'd done to himself, and turn it into one more thing wrong in a house already too full of it. And for the first time all day, Jimmy let himself believe he might be okay. His father carried him out the front door without a word, boots thudding down the porch steps. The drab green 1974 Oldsmobile Delta 88 stood waiting, its chrome flashing like a knife under the Houston sun. The back door was already swinging open when they reached it. His father slid him across the sun-baked vinyl back seat, the surface so hot it burned through the thin cotton of Jimmy's shorts. His head came to rest in his mother's lap. The air inside the Olds smelled of warm plastic, gasoline, and old leather, thick and heavy, impossible to breathe. The windows cracked open barely an inch, the wide steel dashboard up front shimmering under the glare, the long sweep of speedometer numbers blurring in the light. His mother's hands found him immediately, one smoothing back his hair, the other pressing a crumpled handkerchief hard against the blood seeping from his thigh. Her touch was gentle. Her voice was calm, low and steady like river water worn smooth over stone. It wasn't her way. Jimmy knew that in his bones. She wasn't the soft kind. Not with words, not with hands. Kindness, when it came, was something you earned through work or grit, not something she gave away cheap. And yet here she was, holding him like he might slip away if she let go. For the first time, he felt real tenderness from her, and the thought sliced colder than the blood running down his leg. If she was this soft now, it must be because he was dying. But right now, it was all there was. And he was glad for it, with a gratefulness too big for words. The Oldsmobile rumbled beneath them, the big rocket 455 V8, 7.5 liters, engine throbbing low and powerful, as his father dropped the column shifter into drive and mashed the accelerator to the floor. The rear tires barked against the sun-baked concrete, and the car lunged forward, tearing down the road. Jimmy had never been in a car moving this fast. The rows of Gulf stations, seedy diners, the clean gleam of new suburban houses flashed past like a reel of film. Above them, highway signs for the Gulf Freeway whipped by too fast to read. His father didn't slow for lights, didn't check the mirrors. His knuckles turned white on the thin steering wheel. Jimmy knew it must be serious if his dad was driving like that. Real serious. St. Luke's loomed up ahead, big and square, smelling of iodine and dust and the stale smoke of 100 waiting rooms. His mother bundled him against her chest as his father jerked the Olds into the emergency entrance. Tires screeched against broken asphalt. The heavy frame of the car shuddered as it came to a stop. An orderly in white burst through the doors with a wheelchair, but Jimmy didn't need it. His father had him up again before the man could say a word, striding through the glass doors, his boots leaving scuffed prints across the tile floor. Inside, everything smelled sharper. Antiseptic, burnt coffee, sweat. They didn't put Jimmy on a bed. They laid him across a cold stainless steel exam table, blood soaking the edge of his shorts, the metal leaching the heat straight out of his skin. He propped himself up on his elbows, stubborn against the urge to cry. The doctor, a wiry man with horn-rimmed glasses and a forehead slick with sweat, examined the wound briskly, muttering to a nurse in a flat Houston drawl. "No breaks," he said. "Just a gash, a near miss, barely a quarter inch from tearing open the femoral artery. Lucky. 5 stitches in, the crash doors burst open. A man was rolled past on a gurney, howling, a sound like an animal caught in a trap. His arms and chest were raw meat, skin dangling in bloody ribbons. Radiator explosion, one of the nurses barked. The doctor wiped his hands and vanished without a word. Jimmy didn't move. He stayed there, elbows digging into the slick surface, heart pounding in the pit of his stomach. When the doctor returned, he picked up the needle and thread again like nothing had happened. No apology, no explanation, just the business of patching up broken things. Then, the operating light overhead exploded with a sharp crack. Glass rained down like a storm of broken stars, clattering across the floor, pinging against the exam table in glittering, deadly fragments. Jimmy didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't cry out. Neither did the doctor, nor the nurses. The whole room froze, except for the slow, sputtering buzz of the second overhead lamp flickering like it couldn't decide whether to live or die. The ceiling above them shifted with stuttering shadows. A nurse slipped into the room. Her scrubs were stiff green cotton, her white-soled shoes squeaking against the blood-smeared floor. She moved without hurry, her face scrubbed pale, her hair yanked back tight under a cheap white cap. Jimmy watched her longer than he meant to, not because she was pretty, though she was, he realized, but because she moved like none of this scared her, like broken people and bad nights were just part of the job, and he thought, she's pretty, and then immediately snapped his gaze away, heat crawling up the back of his neck. He dared a glance toward the curtain, half expecting his mother's face to appear around it, that look that could peel the truth right off you. But no one moved. The nurse unscrewed the shattered light housing, glass crunching under her careful steps, her hands sure and practiced. Jimmy kept his eyes glued to the sagging ceiling now, feeling the blood stiffen into a black crust across his thigh. The new bulb clicked in overhead. The light flared harsh and bright. The world carried on. But Jimmy didn't. That moment didn't pass like it should have. It lodged itself somewhere deep inside his ribs, heavy as a bullet that missed its mark but stayed anyway. It hardened there. The kind of hurt you don't talk about. The kind that just stays, waiting. The world kept spinning, and Jimmy moved with it. Out of hospitals, out of clean white rooms, back into the dirt and the sweat and the slow drag of the Bayou.